The rope bit into Sarah Miller's wrists, its coarse fibers leaving faint red grooves against her skin. She didn't flinch. Victor Crane stood so close she could smell the mix of whiskey and sweat on his breath. He expected fear, he wanted fear. But Sarah's eyes stayed level, clear and sharp as cold steel. That comfortable farm girl. His tone was mocking, but there was an edge under it, a tension that betrayed he wasn't fully in control. Behind him, 4 mercenaries lounged with rifles in hand, their laughter drifting across the Blackwood compound. The late afternoon light stretched long shadows across the field, framing Sarah against the ancient oak she was tied to. She breathed slow, steady, unblinking. For a moment, Crane faltered. Something in her stare unsettled him, as if she were the one holding him in place, not the other way around. The barracks door opened, spilling harsh light onto the yard. James Maxwell stepped out tall, deliberate, his silhouette unmistakable. He walked towards Sarah, calm as a man walking to a podium, hands clasped behind his back. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice polite, almost cordial, "I wish we could have avoided this." Sarah kept her chin slightly raised, saying nothing. "We offered you 3 times what that ranch is worth," Maxwell continued, circling the tree like a lecturer making a point. "But you had to be difficult. You had to start asking questions." One of the mercenaries snickered. "Just a stubborn farm girl, boss." Maxwell's eyes never left Sarah's. "Is that what you are, just a stubborn farmer's widow?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was just for her. "Or should I call you something else? Perhaps Osprey?" The name cut through the air like a rifle crack. For the first time, Sarah's pupils shifted. A tiny, almost imperceptible change, but Maxwell caught it. Of course he did. He smiled thinly. "I thought so." 3 weeks earlier, the Bitterroot Valley was bathed in gold. Morning light rolled across the mountains, spilling warmth onto Sarah Miller's porch. She stood with a steaming mug of coffee in hand, breathing in the crisp Montana air. The ranch stretched out before her, 300 acres of land that had belonged to the Miller family for 4 generations. The weathered barn, the grazing pastures, the equipment shed, all quiet still, except for the faint whicker of horses somewhere down near the fence line. At 37, Sarah carried herself like someone who had seen too much of the world and chosen to retreat from it. She wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a loose braid, her gaze scanning the horizon. She paused when her eyes caught on the distant perimeter of Fort Blackwood, or what used to be Fort Blackwood. 5 years ago, the decommissioned missile site had been bought by a private military contractor. Since then, activity had increased. More vehicles, more strangers, more late-night gunfire echoing across the valley. Something about it gnawed at her. The screen door creaked open behind her. "You're up with the chickens again," came the gravelly voice of Sheriff Mike Donovan. Sarah didn't turn. "Morning, Mike." The sheriff stepped out onto the porch, his own coffee in hand. At 62, he was still rangy and strong, the kind of man who had been born for boots and duty belts. He leaned against the railing, his gaze following hers toward Blackwood. "They're up to something over there," he muttered. "New people coming in every week. Military types trying hard not to look like military types." "I noticed," Sarah said quietly. "Frank never mentioned what went on there." Sarah glanced at him. "You asked me that before." "Yeah," he said with a sigh, staring into his coffee. "I guess I keep hopping for a different answer." Sarah didn't reply. There were some truths she had spent 5 years trying to bury. Donovan pushed off the railing. "Town meeting at 7 tonight, don't be late." When his cruiser finally disappeared down the long gravel drive, Sarah stayed on the porch, staring toward the locked room in the basement. No one in town knew that room existed. Not even Mike Donovan. That night Pine Ridge Town Hall was crowded, more than 60 people in a town of 800. Sarah slipped into the back row quietly, nodding to Emma Wilson, who ran the general store. At the front, Mayor Thompson cleared his throat and introduced the evening's guest speaker, James Maxwell. Maxwell was taller than Sarah expected, lean and polished. His black polo shirt and tailored tactical pants did little to hide the bearing of a career soldier. "I'm pleased to announce that Blackwood is expanding," he said smoothly, projecting charm as he spoke. "We've secured several new government contracts. This means jobs, investment, opportunity." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She knew sales talk when she heard it. Maxwell's tone shifted as his gaze found her in the back row. "We're prepared to make very generous offers for properties bordering our facility." Sheriff Donovan raised his hand. "Mr. Maxwell, what exactly are you training for out there? I've noticed more activity than usual." "Specialized security training for government clients," Maxwell replied smoothly. "Nothing sinister, I assure you." "And the unmarked helicopters coming and going at night." "Night exercises," Maxwell said, his smile never faltering. When the meeting ended, Sarah slipped toward the exit, but outside Maxwell intercepted her. "Miller," he said, his voice all silk and business, "I'd like to discuss your land." "It's not for sale," Sarah replied evenly. Maxwell tilted his head, as though humoring a child. $3 million is a lot of money for one person to turn down. "My husband's family has worked that land for 4 generations, Sarah said. "Your husband's been gone 5 years, Maxwell countered, his tone sharpening. "Managing 300 acres alone must be difficult." "I manage," Sarah said flatly. Maxwell smiled, but his eyes were cold now. "Think about my offer." He handed her a business card, then turned toward the waiting black SUV. Victor Crane stood leaning against it, arms crossed, watching Sarah with a look that was half challenge, half promise. Sarah's stomach tightened. Something about his stare told her this wasn't over. The porch light was off when Sarah returned home, though she'd left it on. Her pulse quickened. She reached into the glove compartment, retrieving a Glock 19. The weapon was cold and familiar in her hand as she chambered around and slipped silently from the truck. She moved along the side of the house, keeping low, her boots whisper quiet on the gravel. A faint scraping sound came from inside. Frank's study. Sarah's jaw tightened. She entered through the back door, slipping through the darkness until she reached the study door. One smooth motion, light switch with her left hand, gun trained with her right. "Don't move," she said. The man inside froze, then slowly raised his hands. He turned, revealing a lined, weathered face, white hair, sharp blue eyes. "Easy there, young lady," he said calmly. "I'm not armed." Sarah blinked. "Colonel Harrington." The retired Delta Force commander gave her a faint smile. "Hello, Artemis. Been a long time." The name hit her like a physical blow. No one had called her that in 10 years. She raised the Glock again. "How did you find me?" "Frank told me about this place before he died," Harrington said softly. "Said if things ever went sideways, I'd find what I needed here." "Frank died in a climbing accident," Sarah said coldly. Harrington's expression didn't change. "Is that what they told you?" Something in Sarah's gut twisted. "You should open that room in the basement," Harrington said quietly, "because Osprey is active again." The word stopped Sarah cold. No one had said that name aloud in decades. And if Osprey was active again, then everything she had tried to leave behind was about to come roaring back. The steel door hissed as Sarah keyed in the code. The faint smell of oil and cold metal drifted from the room below, a smell that carried her back to another life, another version of herself she had buried. Harrington stood silently at the top of the stairs, giving her space. The fluorescent lights flickered to life as Sarah descended. The room was exactly as she had left it 14 months ago, weapons racked neatly on the walls, comm gear powered down but ready, a large safe in the corner like a sentinel of secrets. Frank kept everything operational, Harrington said, his voice low, almost reverent. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of the desk, feeling the thin layer of dust. He said it made him feel better knowing it was here, that if things ever got bad enough, we'd be ready. Her throat tightened, ready for what, Frank? She crossed to the safe and entered the combination from memory. Inside were files, hard drives, sealed containers marked with codes she hadn't seen in years. One folder caught her eye, Osprey 1987. She handed it to Harrington, then leaned against the desk, arms crossed. I've read everything Frank left behind. I still don't know what Osprey really was. Surveillance reports, personnel files, nothing that explains why people would still be willing to kill over it. Harrington opened the file, flipping through its contents with the practiced eye of a man who had spent decades piecing together fragments of the truth. His expression hardened. That's because only 4 people ever knew the full scope, he said. 2 are dead, I'm the 3rd, and the 4th. Maxwell, Sarah finished. Harrington nodded gravely. Before he went private, Maxwell was Army intelligence attached to us. Your father trusted him. For a while, we all did. Sarah sank into the chair, feeling the weight of years pressing against her. You're telling me my father worked with him? Harrington hesitated, then pulled a worn photograph from his pocket and handed it to her. 4 men stood in front of a cabin, smiling as if life were simpler then. She recognized her father instantly. She had his eyes. Beside him stood a younger Frank, then Harrington himself, his posture as rigid as ever. The 4th man was James Maxwell. Montana, 1986, Harrington said quietly. Your father's cabin in the Bitterroots. The 4 of us were brothers once. Sarah stared at the photograph, feeling the strange ache of something both familiar and foreign. What happened? Power, money, the usual temptations, Harrington said. Your father suspected Maxwell was dirty, but he couldn't prove it. Then your father died, officially an accident, but Frank and I knew better. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had lived so long with the story that her father's death had been a freak accident, that Frank's climbing fall had been a cruel twist of fate. Now both deaths felt connected, deliberate. Why now? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Because Maxwell is still looking for what your father hid. And whatever William Miller buried 38 years ago is dangerous enough that Maxwell is willing to risk everything to get it. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the space between them. You should know, she said finally, that I didn't exactly leave the agency on good terms. There are people who would love to see me dragged back into the light and put on trial. Harrington shrugged. Then we do this quiet. Find what Maxwell's after, finish what your father started, and get out before anyone even knows you were here. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. You make it sound simple. It's not, Harrington said flatly. But you know how this works. Either we move now or Maxwell finds it first. By morning, maps were spread across Sarah's kitchen table. Satellite photos, topographical charts, blueprints of the old Fort Blackwood complex that Frank had painstakingly acquired over the years. Harrington stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the tree line as if expecting trouble at any moment. When the knock came, both of them moved instinctively. Sarah's hand going to the Glock on her hip, Harrington stepping to the side of the doorway. Sheriff Donovan stood outside, hat in hand. Morning, he said, stepping inside after Sarah waved him in. His eyes immediately found Harrington. Friend of Frank. Old friend, Sarah said simply. The 2 men sized each other up. Army Ranger, 75th Regiment, Panama, First Gulf War, Donovan said, as though presenting credentials. Delta Force, Harrington replied, shaking his hand. Too many deployments to count. Donovan let out a low whistle. Delta, huh? You boys were a different breed. He turned to Sarah, his expression more serious now. Word around town is Maxwell's buying up every property that touches Blackwood's perimeter. Offered you $3 million, didn't he? Sarah nodded. That's too much money to just be about expansion, Donovan said grimly. Whatever's going on over there, it's big. After he left, Sarah stared at the maps for a long time. We need more information. Emma Wilson hinted last night that she knew something about Blackwood. I'm going to see her. The general store smelled of coffee and wood polish. Emma Wilson looked up from behind the counter as Sarah entered. Didn't expect to see you in town today, Emma said. Sarah got straight to the point. You said the Blackwood people aren't what they seem. What did you mean? Emma's expression changed instantly, her easy smile vanishing. She walked to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and locked it. My father worked for the government, she said quietly. Not the kind of job you write on a resume. CIA station chief in East Berlin during the 80s. Sarah's brows rose. Your father was Robert Wilson. You knew him. Sarah hesitated. Kosovo, 2004. I was using a different name then. Emma blinked, understanding dawning. You were CIA. Not exactly, Sarah said, but close enough. Emma led her into a small back office. After my father died last year, I found his notes. He was keeping an eye on Fort Blackwood long after he retired. From a locked drawer, she produced a folder filled with surveillance photos, handwritten observations, reports. Sarah flipped through them, feeling the shape of something forming, something much bigger than a land grab. Did he ever mention Osprey? She asked. Emma froze. How do you know that name? So he did, Sarah said. Not directly, Emma admitted, but I found references. Something bad went down in the late 80s, something that got buried. She moved to a painting on the wall, swung it aside to reveal a small safe. There's more. Files I never opened. I thought maybe you'd know what to do with them. Sarah watched silently as Emma worked the combination. Inside was a manila envelope sealed with security tape. Emma handed it over. Sarah tore it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a set of coordinates and a cryptic message. The eagle's nest holds the truth. W.M. Sarah's breath caught. William Miller, she whispered. My father. Emma nodded. That's his handwriting. Sarah nodded once, her throat tight. The coordinates were in the National Forest, near the old perimeter of Fort Blackwood. Do you know those trails? Sarah asked. Like the back of my hand, Emma said. Good, because tonight, we're going to need to get there without Blackwood knowing we were ever there. When Sarah stepped out of the store, she immediately saw the black SUV across the street. Victor Crane leaned against it, coffee in hand, watching her. Their eyes met, and he smiled faintly, the kind of smile that wasn't friendly at all. Sarah nodded once, a silent acknowledgement. If he was watching her in daylight, that meant Maxwell was already suspicious. Whatever game had started, it was accelerating. And there would be no turning back. Night had fallen by the time Sarah pulled off the main road and onto the narrow dirt track that led to Martha Jenkins' cabin. She had taken every back route she knew, circling twice, checking her mirrors until she was certain she wasn't being followed. Colonel Harrington sat silent in the passenger seat, the faint glow of the dashboard cutting across the hard lines of his face. You sure about her? Sarah asked quietly. Martha Jenkins was one of the best intelligence analysts the agency ever had, Harrington said. Your father trusted her more than anyone. If we're going to survive this, we need her. The cabin appeared out of the darkness, a small log home nestled in the pines. A single light burned in the front window, soft and steady. Sarah parked well back from the house and killed the engine. Before they reached the porch, the door opened. A tall, silver-haired woman stood there, her posture as straight as a rifle barrel despite her 70 years, her blue eyes fixed on Harrington. James Harrington, she said, I thought you were dead." "Not for lack of trying on some people's part," Harrington replied. Martha's gaze shifted to Sarah, studying her with open curiosity. "My God, you look just like William, same eyes." Sarah hesitated before stepping forward. "You knew my father." "Knew him," Martha said softly. "I trusted him with my life." She stepped back. "Come in, the others are already here." Inside, the rustic cabin gave way to a surprisingly modern interior. Bookshelves, maps on the walls, radios on a side table. Emma Wilson sat in an armchair near the fire, looking relieved to see Sarah. Sheriff Donovan stood by the window, peering out through a gap in the curtains. "You were followed for the first 5 miles out of town," Martha said matter-of-factly. "Black SUV, 2 occupants. They turned back at the county line." Sarah nodded grimly. "Crane wants me to know I'm under surveillance." Martha moved to a bookshelf, pulled a specific volume. With a soft click, the entire shelf swung open to reveal a hidden room. "Jesus," Donovan muttered. "What exactly did you do for the government, Martha?" "Officially," Martha said with a thin smile, "cultural liaison for the State Department. Unofficially, I kept track of who was lying to whom during the Cold War." The hidden room was a miniature command center. Radios, computers, maps covering the walls. They gathered around a table and Sarah laid out everything she knew. Her father's connection to Osprey, Frank's search for the truth, Maxwell's interest in the ranch, and the coordinates Emma had given her. Donovan let out a low whistle. "You think your father hid evidence of treason?" "And Maxwell's trying to find it before anyone else does," Sarah confirmed. Martha's eyes narrowed, scanning an old blueprint of Fort Blackwood pinned to the wall. "He might not just be looking for documents," she said. "Fort Blackwood was rumored to house tactical nuclear armaments back in the day, small-yield devices. Officially, they never existed." The room went quiet. "You're suggesting Maxwell is looking for a nuke?" Donovan asked. "I'm suggesting we need to get to those coordinates before he does," Martha replied grimly. "Because if William Miller discovered something this big, Maxwell will burn this valley to the ground to cover it up." Sarah felt the old sensation creeping back, the one she hadn't felt since she left the agency. The mental shift, the cataloging of assets and risks, the slow, cold focus of someone preparing for a mission. "Then we move tonight," she said. Harrington nodded, "before Maxwell tightens the net." They were still gathering gear when the first shot rang out. The cabin window exploded inward, showering glass across the floor. "Down," Harrington barked, grabbing Sarah by the shoulder and pulling her to the ground. "Sniper!" Another shot hit the door frame, splintering wood. Donovan rolled to the corner, drawing his sidearm and firing blindly toward the tree line. Sarah crawled to the far wall, heart hammering but mind clear. "They shouldn't know we're here," she hissed to Harrington. "Someone talked," Harrington growled, peering through the shattered window. "Or we were followed despite our precautions." A third shot slammed into the wall, just inches from Sarah's head. "We can't stay pinned down," Sarah said. "They'll have a team moving in to finish the job." "Cover me," she told Harrington. Without waiting for a reply, she bolted for the back door, zigzagging across the clearing. A shot kicked up dirt near her heel, but she didn't stop until she reached the cover of the pines. Moving fast and low, she circled toward the sniper's likely position. The terrain was steep and rocky, but Sarah moved with the precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. At the top of the ridge, she dropped to her stomach and crawled forward. There he was prone, rifle aimed at the cabin, so focused on his targets he never heard her approach. Sarah pressed the barrel of her Sig Sauer against the back of his head. "Drop the rifle," she said quietly. The sniper froze. Slowly, carefully, he set aside the weapon, a suppressed Remington 700. "Now roll over." He complied. He was young, early 30s, with the hard, empty look of a man who'd been killing for a living long enough to stop feeling much about it. "Who sent you?" Sarah demanded. No answer. "Crane." A flicker in the man's eyes. "You have two choices," Sarah said flatly. "Start talking, or I put the next round through your kneecap." "You won't shoot me," he said, testing her. Sarah shifted her aim and fired. The round grazed his ear, close enough to draw blood. His composure cracked. "Crane sent me," he admitted. "Said to follow the sheriff, see where he went. If I saw a gathering, I was supposed to create a distraction." Sarah's eyes narrowed. A distraction that could have killed someone. "I wasn't aiming to hit anyone," the sniper said quickly. "Just keep you pinned down until Crane's team got into position." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What team?" Before the man could answer, gunfire erupted from the direction of the cabin, automatic fire this time. Sarah knocked the sniper unconscious with a sharp strike from her pistol, grabbed his rifle, and sprinted back toward the clearing. From the ridge she could see them, a full assault team advancing on the cabin, muzzle flashes strobing in the dark. Harrington and Donovan were returning fire from cover. Inside, Martha and Emma had joined the defense. Sarah dropped prone, settled into position, and brought the rifle to her shoulder. Through the scope, she found her first target. "Exhale. Squeeze." The man went down, hit in the shoulder, alive but out of the fight. She worked the bolt, found another, fired again. The remaining attackers scattered, realizing they were taking fire from the high ground. Through the scope, Sarah caught a glimpse of Victor Crane near the tree line, directing the assault. She shifted her aim, but he ducked out of sight before she could take the shot. Below, Harrington and Donovan used the chaos to fall back toward the cabin. Inside, gunfire flashed from the windows as Martha and Emma laid down covering fire. But Sarah knew they couldn't hold forever. Crane had brought enough men to overrun them eventually, and her ammo was limited. Harrington's voice came over her radio, clipped and tense. "Artemis, this is Eagle. We need an exit strategy. They're circling around." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Copy. I'll draw their attention, get everyone to the storm cellar." She fired her remaining rounds at the east side of the clearing, forcing the attackers to ground. Then she abandoned the rifle and sprinted down the ridge, moving fast and low through the trees. By the time she reached the cabin's hidden storm cellar, Harrington, Donovan, Martha, and Emma were already inside, preparing to move through the escape tunnel. Crane had brought a small army, but they weren't going to get what they came for. Not tonight. The tunnel smelled of damp earth and old steel. Martha's storm cellar had been a Cold War relic, built when the world had lived one phone call away from annihilation. The escape tunnel was narrow, reinforced, and completely dark except for the single red glow stick Donovan had cracked as they entered. "Move fast," Sarah urged, voice low. "Crane's men will sweep the house and find the entrance soon enough." They moved in silence, boots crunching on the packed earth. At the far end, a ladder led up to a hidden exit concealed inside an old shed 100 yards into the forest. Sarah was first up, SIG drawn, scanning as she pushed the hatch open. The night air hit her face cool, pine-scented, alive with distant gunfire. "All clear," she whispered. One by one, the others climbed out. Emma clutched the laptop bag holding the Osprey files, her face pale but determined. Martha carried a pump-action shotgun that looked like it had been cleaned and oiled yesterday. Donovan's sleeve was dark with blood from the grazing shot he'd taken earlier, but he gripped his revolver in his good hand. "They'll be circling the house," Harrington said grimly. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they sweep outward." "Then we move," Sarah said. Her truck was parked half a mile away on a back service road, a deliberate contingency she had put in place earlier. If they could reach it, they could make for the coordinates Emma had given her before Crane's people regrouped. but Sarah knew they wouldn't get a clean run. Not with Crane hunting them. The woods were black and close, the moonlight barely filtering through the pines. Sarah moved point, every step measured, her ears tuned for the smallest sound. Behind her, the others followed in a staggered formation. They had covered maybe 200 yards when she raised her fist, the silent signal to stop. Somewhere ahead, faint voices drifted through the trees, equipment rattling, boots crunching on pine needles. "Patrol," Harrington breathed. Sarah gestured for the others to stay put, then slipped forward alone. She eased onto her belly at the ridgeline, crawling until she could see the source of the noise. Below, a team of 8 Blackwood operators was establishing a perimeter, heavy gear, night vision, automatic weapons. They weren't just hunting, they were setting a net. Sarah's stomach sank. Maxwell wasn't leaving this to chance. She slid back to the group. 8 operators scanning the valley floor. They're using ground-penetrating radar, looking for tunnels. They're close to the coordinates from Emma's father's note. Emma's breath caught. Then they're after the same thing we are. "Exactly," Sarah said, "which means we have to get there first." Martha reached into her pack, pulling out a small, palm-sized device that looked like a rock. "EMP," she said. "Old school, could knock out their electronics for a few minutes, buy us time." Sarah shook her head. "Save it. We might need it when we reach the coordinates. For now, we move parallel, keep to the high ground, stay invisible." For an hour, they crept through the forest, angling west to skirt the Blackwood search pattern. Every few minutes, Sarah would halt the group, listening, scanning. Crane's men were good, too good. Their search grid was tightening, pushing the group toward a natural bottleneck where the terrain narrowed into a steep ravine. Sarah didn't like it. "This is where they'll catch us if we're not careful," she whispered to Harrington. "Then we make it a trap," he said simply. Sarah's lips curved into a grim smile. They reached the ravine just as the first distant shapes appeared behind them, flashlights cutting briefly across the trees before going dark again. Sarah led them down the slope carefully, one hand gripping a root, the other steadying Emma as she descended. Halfway down, Emma's boot slipped on loose shale. She let out a startled cry and began to slide. Sarah lunged, catching her wrist just before she would have hit the rocks below. "You okay?" Emma nodded, shaken but unhurt. "Good," Sarah said, voice firm, "because we're about to get busy." She passed the Osprey laptop bag to Martha. "Take this and head west along the stream. Donovan goes with you. Stay low, stay quiet. If we don't make it back, get this to Robert Garrison at the Washington Post. He was my father's contact. He'll know what to do." Martha nodded, eyes fierce. "Don't you dare get yourself killed, Sarah Miller." "No promises," Sarah said, checking the mag in her SIG. She waited until the 3 of them were out of sight, then turned to Harrington. "Ready." The old colonel grinned, a feral, dangerous grin, just like Kandahar. The first Blackwood operators entered the ravine minutes later, moving fast, rifles raised. Sarah waited until 4 of them were in the narrowest section. Then she and Harrington opened fire from elevated positions on opposite sides. Their shots were precise, surgical knees, shoulders, disabling but not killing. Within seconds, all 4 were down, groaning and clutching wounds. 2 more came sliding into the ravine, shouting for their comrades, and Sarah put a round into the dirt inches from their feet. "Drop your weapons," she barked. The first man hesitated, and Harrington shot the rifle clean out of his hands. Both men froze, then complied. Sarah slid down into the ravine, SIG trained on them. "Where Crane?" she demanded. "Go to hell," one of them spat. Sarah pressed the muzzle into the man's shoulder wound. "I won't ask twice." His breath hissed through his teeth. "Command post, north side of the valley." "How many operators total?" Harrington asked. 24, the man gasped. "More coming." Sarah's voice stayed calm, but her stomach knotted. "What are you looking for out here?" The man hesitated, then muttered, "Bunker, Cold War weapons installation. Maxwell says it contains a weapon." Sarah and Harrington exchanged a glance. "A weapon, not just documents." "What kind of weapon?" Sarah pressed. "Don't know," the man said quickly. "Above my pay grade, just know Maxwell wants it bad." Sarah stepped back. "Bind their wounds," she told Harrington. "Leave their beacons active. Let their extraction team find them. We keep moving." By the time they reached the ridgeline overlooking the valley, the night was quiet again, too quiet. Sarah dropped prone, raising her binoculars. Below she could see the glow of floodlights, the Blackwood command post. And there, unmistakable even at this distance, Victor Crane, hulking and broad-shouldered, directing the search. "Where Crane is, Maxwell won't be far," Harrington said grimly. Sarah lowered the binoculars, decision forming like ice in her chest. "Emma and the others should be close to the fire road by now. Our job is to keep Crane focused on us and find out exactly what Maxwell's after." Harrington gave a short nod. "Just the two of us against their whole operation." Sarah checked her weapon, racked the slide. "Sounds about right." The ground was slick with pine needles as they moved closer to the command post, using the terrain for cover. But something felt wrong. Sarah raised her hand, signaling a halt. "Security's too light," she whispered. "Where is everybody?" Harrington scanned the perimeter, his expression hardening. "They've deployed most of their force elsewhere." Realization hit them both at the same moment. "They're going after Martha's cabin," Harrington said grimly. Sarah's pulse spiked. They must have tracked the container if Emma and Donovan took the fire road. "They're walking into an ambush," Harrington finished. Sarah yanked her radio from her belt, but all it gave her was static. Blackwood's comms jammer was still active. "Then we outrun them," Sarah said, already moving back toward the ridge. Harrington matched her pace, breathing hard but steady. "We push hard, we can reach them before Crane does." "And if we can't?" Harrington asked. Sarah's jaw set. "Then we make sure Maxwell doesn't get what he came for." They ran through the forest, shadows racing past, hearts pounding in sync with the rhythm of their boots. Above them, a drone's mechanical hum swept the treetops. Sarah froze, pressing against the trunk of a massive pine as the drone's searchlight panned across the ground. They stayed motionless until it passed, then sprinted again, pushing their bodies to the limit. When they crested the last ridge, Sarah could see it, the faint glow of the old hunting cabin in the distance. And just beyond the tree line, Blackwood operators moving into assault positions. Maxwell's trap was already closing. Sarah dropped into a crouch, scanning the clearing below. Blackwood's assault team was moving into position, a dozen men, maybe more. Silent, efficient, weapons up. They were converging on the fire road where Martha, Emma, and Donovan should have been by now. "Too many to engage head-on," Harrington muttered. Sarah's mind worked fast, running through options. The cabin was too far. The others were too close to the kill box. Then she saw it 50 yards from the road, parked in the shadows under a tarp, a Blackwood helicopter. "Transport bird," Sarah said, "single pilot." Harrington followed her gaze and grinned grimly. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" "Yep." "Then I'll cover you." Sarah moved like a ghost through the trees, staying low, counting the beats between the sweep of the nearest operator's flashlight. At the helicopter, she slid under the tarp, heart hammering. The cockpit smelled of jet fuel and oil, comforting, familiar smells. She moved quickly, checking the instrument panel, finding the keys already in the ignition. "They left it hot," she muttered. She slid into the pilot's seat, running through the startup sequence from memory. The blades began to spin, slow at first, then faster, cutting through the night air. Shouts erupted from the tree line. She saw Crane turn, his expression darkening. "Contact," one of the operators yelled. Sarah pulled pitch and lifted off just as a burst of automatic fire tore through the clearing. Bullets pinged off the fuselage. She banked hard left, skimming low over the trees, using the terrain as cover. "Harrington, get the others to the road," she shouted over the comm. "Copy," Harrington's voice crackled back. "We're moving." Down below, Crane was already barking orders, directing his men to intercept. "Bring her down." But Sarah wasn't giving them the chance. She swung the helicopter around, coming in low over the fire road. Through the windshield she saw Emma, Donovan, and Martha pinned behind a fallen log, muzzle flashes sparking all around them. Sarah lined up her run, then opened fire with the Bird's mounted door gun, sweeping the tree line. The attackers scattered, diving for cover. "Move, move," Sarah shouted over the loudspeaker. Emma and the others sprinted for the clearing. Harrington appeared from the opposite tree line, covering their retreat with controlled bursts from his M4. Sarah dropped the skids low to the ground. "Get in." Donovan shoved Emma up first, then Martha, then hauled himself aboard. Harrington climbed in last, slamming the door just as another volley of fire chewed up the dirt around them. Sarah yanked the collective and hauled the Bird skyward. Crane watched from below, his jaw tight, radio pressed to his ear. "Get Maxwell on comms," he snapped. A moment later, Maxwell's smooth voice came through the headset. "She has the files." "Yes, sir," Crane said grimly. "Then she just made this personal," Maxwell replied. The helicopter roared through the night sky, low and fast. Emma clutched the laptop bag to her chest, wide-eyed but silent. Martha was reloading her shotgun with shaking hands. "You just stole a helicopter," Donovan said, almost impressed. "Borrowed," Sarah said, eyes scanning the horizon. "We'll ditch it once we're clear." "You realize this is going to bring the entire Blackwood compound down on us," Harrington said. Sarah's hands tightened on the cyclic. "Good, then maybe we stop running." They put down on a remote stretch of ranch land just before dawn, setting the helicopter to auto-destruct. Sarah watched as the charges blew, the fireball lighting up the pre-dawn sky before fading to smoke. "Won't take them long to triangulate where we went down," Harrington said grimly. "Then we make this count," Sarah replied. She opened the laptop bag and pulled out the hard drives and files Emma's father had left behind. For the next hour they worked feverishly, cross-referencing data. Emma scrolled through pages of decrypted text, her face pale. "This is worse than we thought. Osprey wasn't just a surveillance program. It was a contingency plan, a network of covert weapons caches across the western United States." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What kind of weapons?" "Biological, chemical, tactical nuclear," Emma said grimly. "Your father was assigned to shut it all down when the Cold War ended, but he must have discovered one cache still active." Martha looked at Sarah. "If Maxwell gets to it first." "He could hold this entire valley hostage," Sarah finished. "Or worse," Harrington said, "sell it to the highest bidder." Before Sarah could reply, the distant thump of rotor blades echoed across the valley. They all froze. "That's not ours," Donovan said grimly. Sarah grabbed her rifle. "They tracked us." The helicopter appeared over the ridgeline, searchlights sweeping. "We're out of time," Harrington said. "We need to move now." They grabbed what they could carry and fled into the timberline just as the Blackwood Bird set down near the burning wreckage of the stolen chopper. Through the trees, Sarah saw Victor Crane step out, scanning the ground like a predator. Then a second figure emerged from the aircraft. James Maxwell. Even at this distance, Sarah recognized the man from the photograph, older now, harder, but with the same calculating calm. "Fan out," Maxwell ordered. "I want Miller alive. Kill the others if you have to." Sarah felt the words hit her like ice. This wasn't just business anymore. Maxwell wanted her, personally. They made it another mile before Sarah called a halt. "This is just going to keep happening," she said, breath steady but eyes burning. "He's not going to stop, not until I put him down or he puts me in the ground." Emma stepped closer. "Then what do we do?" Sarah looked at Harrington, then at the others. "We stop running," she said quietly. "We get to the cache before he does, and then we make sure whatever's in there never falls into anyone's hands again." The first light of dawn crept over the mountains, washing the valley in gold. Sarah stood alone for a moment, feeling the cold air on her face. Her father's voice seemed to echo in her memory, words he had spoken to her once on this very land. "Courage isn't about never being afraid, Sarah. It's about deciding what matters more than fear." She closed her eyes, breathing in deep. Then she slung her rifle over her shoulder and turned back to the group. "We move at first light," she said. No one argued. The mountains were still shadowed when they began the climb toward the coordinates. Sarah led the way, rifle slung across her chest, every step deliberate. The forest was damp with morning mist, each breath a white cloud. Emma trudged behind her, exhausted but resolute, clutching the laptop bag like a lifeline. Harrington brought up the rear, scanning the trees for movement. "We're burning daylight," Donovan muttered. "Good," Sarah said quietly. "If Maxwell's moving men into position, daylight will make them easier to spot." Martha glanced at her, one brow raised. "You sound almost eager for them to try." Sarah didn't answer. Inside, her thoughts were cold and focused. Maxwell wasn't just a threat to her land anymore. He wasn't just an old ghost from her father's past. He was a man who would kill anyone who stood between him and Osprey. And Sarah wasn't about to let that happen. They reached the ridge by midday. From here, the coordinates were less than a mile away. An old section of national forest closed off decades ago, officially due to erosion hazards. Sarah scanned the valley below through her binoculars. And there it was. Half buried in the earth, concealed under decades of overgrowth, the faint outline of a blast door. "Bingo," Harrington said quietly. But Sarah's stomach tightened. There was movement near the site. 2 Blackwood operators sweeping the area. "They're ahead of us," she said grimly. Martha frowned. "Then we've lost." "Not yet," Sarah said. 2 men means reconnaissance. Maxwell wouldn't send a full team until he knows the cache is still intact. This is our window." They waited until the operators moved to the far side of the site. Then Sarah and Harrington descended silently through the trees, staying in the operators' blind spots. When they were close enough, Sarah signaled. 2 shots clean, suppressed, dropped both men without a sound. Sarah exhaled slowly, then moved to the blast door. It was still locked, its keypad caked with dirt and rust. "Frank left me a code," Sarah said quietly. "Said if I ever found this place, I'd know what to do." She punched in the 6-digit sequence from memory. For a moment, nothing happened. Then there was a deep mechanical groan, and the massive door slid open, revealing a dark corridor descending into the earth. A wave of cold air rolled out, metallic, stale, like a tomb. Emma shivered. "Feels like walking into a grave." Sarah switched on her flashlight. "Stay close." Inside, the bunker stretched into darkness, concrete walls lined with peeling paint. The air was thick with dust, the silence oppressive. Sarah's boots echoed softly as she led them down the hall, passing rooms filled with decaying equipment, comm gear, bunks, supply crates. Finally, they reached a reinforced inner chamber. Sarah pushed the door open and froze. The room beyond was immaculate. No dust, no decay. And in the center stood a reinforced container, sealed and humming faintly with power. Harrington stepped forward, running a gloved hand over the surface. "Whatever, in here, it's still active." Emma crouched, examining the control panel. It's biometric, needs an authorized signature. Sarah's stomach sank. Her father's name was on the authorization list. And hers. She placed her hand on the scanner. The machine word beeped, then hissed open. Inside was a small metallic cylinder. A warhead. Jesus Christ, Donovan whispered. A W-54, Harrington said grimly. Low-yield nuke, portable. This thing could level 10 city blocks. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. Her father hadn't just discovered a weapons cache. He had been guarding one. And now she had just given Maxwell the very thing he wanted. The sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor. Sarah snapped her rifle to her shoulder, motioning the others into cover. From the darkness, Victor Crane appeared, followed by James Maxwell himself. He was unarmed, his black tactical jacket unzipped, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. "Ms. Miller," Maxwell said, his voice calm, almost cordial, "thank you for opening the door for us." Sarah didn't lower her weapon. "Stay where you are." Maxwell stopped, smiling faintly. "Still playing soldier, I see." "You're not leaving with that warhead," Sarah said flatly. Maxwell tilted his head. "You think you can stop me?" "I know I can," Sarah said. Crane stepped forward, rifle raised, but Maxwell held up a hand, stopping him. "I have no interest in killing you, Sarah," Maxwell said. "Not yet. Your father and I had the same goal once, to keep this country safe. He just lost the will to do what was necessary." "He trusted you," Sarah said, voice tight. "And he died for it," Maxwell replied. "But you're smarter than he was. You know the world we live in now. You know what happens when power sits idle, someone else takes it, someone worse." "You want to use it," Sarah said. Maxwell didn't deny it. "I want to control the game board before someone else does. Do you think the threats we face care about treaties, about rules? This warhead could end a war before it starts." Sarah's grip on her rifle tightened. "You sound just like the people my father warned me about," she said. Maxwell's smile faded. "Your father was a good man, but he lacked vision. You don't." "Vision," Sarah said bitterly. "This isn't vision, this is fear with a trigger." Maxwell's eyes hardened. "You can stop me now, kill me right here, but my men will still take the weapon, and then this gets uglier." Sarah's mind raced. Killing Maxwell would end him, but Crane would still be standing. And once Blackwood had the weapon, they'd vanish before she could stop them again. She had seconds to decide. A sudden explosion rocked the bunker, dust raining from the ceiling. The emergency lights flickered red. "What was that?" Crane barked. "EMP," Martha's voice came through the comm. "We just bought you 2 minutes." The warhead's containment field shut down with a sharp hiss. Maxwell's expression shifted, finally losing its calm. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Yeah," Sarah said, backing toward the warhead. "I made it a fair fight." Before Crane could react, Sarah grabbed the warhead, slinging it into a carrying case Harrington shoved toward her. "Move," she shouted. The group bolted for the corridor as Crane opened fire, bullets sparking against the walls. Sarah returned fire in short, precise bursts, forcing Crane to take cover. Maxwell's voice echoed after them, calm again but sharper now. "You can't run forever, Sarah. This ends one way." Sarah didn't look back. "Yeah," she muttered under her breath, "but it ends on my terms." They burst out into daylight, lungs burning. Emma stumbled, nearly dropping the case, but Harrington grabbed her arm and pulled her along. Behind them, the sound of rotor blades was already rising. Maxwell had called in reinforcements. Sarah looked to the ridgeline. "We'll never outrun them carrying this thing," Donovan said grimly. "Then we don't run," Sarah said. "We make our stand here." The ridgeline was narrow, exposed, and terrible ground for a stand, which was exactly why Sarah chose it. Maxwell's men would have to come up from below, climbing into her field of fire. She dropped to one knee, checking the warhead case. Still sealed, still heavy with the weight of everything they were fighting for. "Positions," she ordered. Harrington nodded and took the east flank. Donovan moved to the west, steadying his revolver with his uninjured arm. Martha and Emma set up in the center behind a fallen log, Emma's hands shaking as she loaded Harrington's spare magazines. In the distance, the drone of rotor blades grew louder. "They'll come in waves," Harrington said grimly. "Probe our defenses, then try to flank." "Let them try," Sarah said. Inside, her heart was a war drum, but her mind was still calm. Everything narrowed to angles, distances, ammunition counts. The ridge was where they would make their stand. The first Blackwood operators appeared just after noon, dark shapes moving through the trees below, advancing cautiously. Sarah raised her rifle, lined up her first shot, and squeezed. One man went down, hit clean in the leg. The rest scattered for cover. Then came the answering fire, a storm of rounds hammering the ridge, chewing up bark and stone. "Keep them at distance," Harrington shouted. Sarah shifted to the right, firing controlled bursts. Donovan's revolver barked steadily from the left flank. For several minutes, the fight was all noise and motion, gunfire, shouted commands, the snap of bullets overhead. Then Sarah heard the distinctive crack of a rifle, different from the others. "Sniper!" She flattened against the rock, just as a round smashed into the tree behind her. "Counter-sniper," she yelled. Harrington was already on it, scanning with binoculars. 2 o'clock, high ground. Sarah rolled to a new position, raised the stolen Remington from the ravine fight, and sighted in. Through the scope, she found the glint of a scope in the tree line. "Exhale. Squeeze." The sniper dropped. Sarah chambered another round, but no second shooter appeared. For a moment, the ridge was silent. Then a new voice cut through the radio channel, smooth, calm, unmistakable. "Impressive shooting, Sarah." "Maxwell." "You can end this," he said. "Leave the device and walk away. No one else has to die." Sarah keyed her mic, her voice like ice. "You first." Maxwell chuckled softly. "I thought you might say that." The next wave came harder, more men, more firepower. Grenades exploded below, sending showers of dirt over the ridge. Harrington fired in short, controlled bursts, covering Sarah as she moved to a new firing position. "This is buying time, not winning," he shouted between volleys. "I know," Sarah said, swapping mags. Then she saw him, Victor Crane, moving like a shadow through the smoke, directing his men forward. Her shot lined up perfectly, center mass. She hesitated. Something about pulling the trigger now felt too easy. Crane deserved to know who had beaten him. She shifted aim and blew the rifle out of his hands instead. Crane roared, fury breaking through his usual control, and signaled his men forward. "Brace," Harrington yelled. The ridge erupted in chaos, muzzle flashes, shouts, the stutter of automatic fire. Sarah fought like a machine, every round precise. But there were too many of them. Harrington took a round to the shoulder and dropped behind cover, gritting his teeth. "I'm good," he yelled. "Keep firing." But Sarah could see the blood pooling fast. They were running out of time. Crane himself was climbing now, leading from the front like a man who meant to end it personally. Sarah emptied her mag, dropped it, slammed in a fresh one. Crane was 20 yards away. 15. 10. Then Harrington was on his feet, staggering toward the edge of the ridge with something in his hand, the EMP charge Martha had saved. "No," Sarah shouted. Harrington turned, meeting her eyes across the chaos. "You finish this," he said simply. Then he threw himself off the ridge, right into the advancing operators. The charge went off midair, a deafening crack that lit the forest like lightning. The shockwave knocked men to the ground, fried comms, and bought them 10 precious seconds of silence. When Sarah reached the edge, Harrington was gone, swallowed by the smoke and the bodies below. Her chest constricted, grief a sharp, immediate thing. But there was no time to mourn. Crane was still coming. He crested the ridge like a force of nature, bloodied, furious, a combat knife in his hand. Sarah dropped her rifle, drawing her own blade. "Thought you run forever," Crane growled. "Not my style," Sarah said. He lunged, knife flashing. Sarah sidestepped, catching his wrist, twisting, but he was stronger, driving her back toward the rock face. She slammed an elbow into his ribs, felt the air leave him, but he didn't drop. The fight became primal, close, brutal, every strike fueled by rage and survival. Crane caught her by the throat, pinning her against the rock. "Maxwell wants you alive," he snarled. "I'd rather bring you down dead." Sarah's vision blurred, but her hand found the hilt of her knife, still in its sheath. With one last surge of strength, she drove it up into Crane's side. His eyes went wide. For a moment, neither moved. Then he released her, staggering back, blood soaking his shirt. "You," he rasped, collapsing to one knee. Sarah stepped forward, wrenching the knife free. "This is for Frank," she said quietly. Crane fell, the fight leaving him at last. For a long moment, there was only the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. The ridge was littered with spent brass, smoke rising in thin columns. Maxwell's voice crackled over the comm again, flat now, almost cold. "You just killed my best man." Sarah wiped the blood from her blade. "Then send your worst. I'm not done yet." Emma and Martha emerged from cover, pale but alive. Donovan limped toward her, face grim. "Where Harrington?" Sarah swallowed hard. "He bought us this ridge." No one spoke. They all knew what that meant. Finally, Sarah turned toward the case, holding the warhead. "We finished this," she said. "Finish it how?" Martha asked quietly. Sarah looked back down the ridge, where Blackwood's remaining men were regrouping. "By making sure Maxwell has nothing left to fight for." They began rigging the warhead for transport, not to deliver it, but to move it to higher ground. Sarah had a plan forming, reckless, dangerous, but the only way to end this without Maxwell walking away with the prize. As they worked, Sarah felt the weight of Harrington's last words. "You finish this." She intended to, even if it meant none of them walked away. The warhead case sat in the dirt like a silent judge. Sarah crouched beside it, fingers resting on the latches. The others waited in a tense half-circle, Martha pale but steady, Donovan reloading with shaking hands, Emma clutching the radio unit like she could will it back to life. Down below, Maxwell's surviving operators regrouped, their dark forms like ants swarming the forest floor. Sarah rose, slinging her rifle, her face set. "This ends tonight." "Whatever you're thinking," Donovan said, "it's going to get us all killed." "Maybe," Sarah said softly, "but if Maxwell leaves this valley with that warhead, more than us die, maybe a lot more." Martha nodded once. "Then we do it right. We make sure there's nothing left for him to take." They moved fast, climbing higher up the ridge until they reached a rocky outcrop overlooking the whole valley. From here, Sarah could see the old fire road winding through the pines, the distant glow of Blackwood's base far to the north. This was where it had to end. They placed the warhead in the center of the outcrop, rigging the case with the last of Harrington's detonation charges. "Timer or remote?" Donovan asked. "Remote," Sarah said. "I want Maxwell to see it." They didn't have to wait long. The sound of rotor blades came first, then the glint of a helicopter rising above the trees. Maxwell's bird set down at the far end of the clearing. He stepped out slowly, deliberately, black jacket still neat, calm as ever, as though this were just another negotiation table. He walked forward alone, hands visible, stopping 20 yards from Sarah. "You've cost me a great deal, Sarah," he said. "You're not taking it," she replied. Maxwell glanced at the warhead behind her. "That weapon was never meant to sit in a vault forever. Your father understood that." "My father understood that some things should stay buried," Sarah said, her voice steady. "Do you think destroying it will change anything?" Maxwell asked. "There are other weapons, other caches. You can't stop them all." "No," Sarah said quietly, "but I can stop you." Maxwell studied her for a long moment. "You have his eyes," he said finally, "and his stubbornness. That's what got him killed." Sarah didn't look away. No, what got him killed was trusting the wrong man. For the first time, something flickered across Maxwell's face, a flash of irritation, maybe even guilt, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Walk away, Sarah," he said. "Take your friends and go. You've proven your point." "And what? Wait until you find the next weapon, the next valley to burn." Maxwell's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the world you're living in." "I understand enough," Sarah said. She raised the remote detonator, thumb hovering over the switch. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't." "Try me." For a moment the clearing was silent, the kind of silence that hums like a wire stretched to its breaking point. Then Maxwell took one slow step back. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Sarah said softly, "it is." She pressed the detonator. The charges went off in a roar that shook the ridge. The blast tore through the warhead casing, the shockwave rolling down into the valley like thunder. When the dust cleared, the weapon was nothing but molten scrap. Maxwell stood staring at it, jaw clenched. Then he turned without a word, signaling to the helicopter. Within seconds, he was airborne, the sound of the rotors fading into the distance. Sarah sank to her knees, her body shaking now that it was finally over. Emma dropped beside her, tears streaking her soot-covered face. "We did it." Sarah nodded slowly. "We did." Martha put a hand on her shoulder. "Harrington would have been proud." Sarah swallowed hard. "He gave us the time we needed. We made it count." They descended the ridge at dawn, moving slowly this time. No more running, no more firefights. Just the sound of boots on earth and the distant call of a hawk overhead. By the time they reached Sarah's ranch, the sun had fully risen, washing the valley in gold. Sarah stood on the porch for a long moment, staring out over the land. Her land. It felt different now, heavier somehow. Like the ground itself knew what had happened out there. Emma joined her, quiet for a long time before she spoke. "What will you do now?" Sarah's eyes traced the horizon. "Rebuild," she said. "And Maxwell?" Sarah's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "He'll try again, somewhere else, but next time he won't find me waiting." The sheriff's cruiser pulled up an hour later. Donovan stepped out, looking tired but alive. "Town's buzzing," he said. "Half of them heard the blast last night. I told them it was an old munitions dump clearing out. No one's asking too many questions." Sarah nodded. "Good." "You really think he's gone?" Sarah glanced at the mountains. "No, but we sent a message. He knows now this place isn't his to take." Donovan studied her for a long moment. "You know, for a farm girl, you handle yourself like someone who's seen a lot more than cattle." Sarah didn't reply. Some truths were still hers to keep. That night, after the others had gone, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the wall. She pulled out the photograph Harrington had given her. Her father, Harrington, Frank, and Maxwell, smiling like young men who thought they had all the time in the world. Sarah set it down carefully, tracing her father's face with her thumb. "You were right," she whispered into the stillness. "Some things do need to stay buried." Outside, the wind moved through the pines, soft as a lullaby. Sarah stood, turned off the light, and went to the porch. The valley stretched out below, quiet whole hers again. She breathed deep, letting the cool night air fill her lungs. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And tonight, it had spoken louder than words ever could.